Hey guys, what's going on? Welcome back to another video. In today's video, we're going to be talking about the 2020 Senate elections as of September 16th, 2020. So we got, we're getting really close to the election, and I'm really hyped for it, even though it has a good chance of not going my way. But, that is all right because, the will of the people, right? So now we're going to start filling out our safe states. Oregon is a safe state. That's not debatable. New Mexico, I could see that being likely. Had the Republicans ran Mark Ronchetti, Elisa Martinez, they would have been able to make that race a bit more competitive than it would be now. But Ronchetti, not a super strong candidate, especially going against a popular representative, Ben Ray Lujan. But Elisa Martinez, remember, she was a Latina. She was a member of the Navajo Nation, and she was the chair of the New Mexico Alliance for Life, and she would have been able to maybe steal a few votes from the Democrats, who are usually Democratic voters. But she lost the nomination to Mark Ronchetti. So yeah, and then Illinois, I do think will just be safe barely. Willie Wilson, based on his own internal polls, he isn't polling very well. So that's why my gut's saying it'll just barely be safe. Although I think it could be likely if Wilson does take away enough votes from Durbin. Either way, this is a blue state, not really going to be red anytime soon. So that's 43 seats to the Democrats. Now, Virginia, I've seen a lot of people saying it's likely. Got to remember that Tim Kaine, he won his Senate race there by 16 points in 2018, only 2 years ago. It's basically the same electorate. And our safe margins are only 12 plus. So Mark Warner could underperform Kaine by 3.5 points, and he could still win this race by a safe margin. So he's not really in danger. I do think it'll be safe. So now we're going to go fill out our safe Republican states as usual. All these states are safe indisputably. I guess you could make the argument that Tennessee would be likely as a result of it being an open seat, but I don't see. Marquita Bradshaw is the Democratic candidate there. She only raised $25,000. First of all, second of all, she is very progressive for a state like Tennessee, and as we all know, Democrats who win there and make it competitive are conservative Democrats, not progressive Democrats. The same thing with West Virginia. Look at Joe Manchin. He is a conservative Democrat. He voted for Brett Kavanaugh. So he does vote with the Republican Party sometimes, and that's good for him because he's in a red state. So, yeah. Speaking of West Virginia, the Democratic Party is running a progressive there. Her name is Paula Jean Swearengin. She tried to challenge Manchin in 2018. She ended up losing big, but so she won the nomination against Richard Ojeda. Kind of like New Mexico, if the Democrats had ran the right candidate in West Virginia, they could have made it competitive, but that's not the case, so it'll be safe. Now we're going to move on to Arizona, which according to RCP, which does lean a little bit to the right, but was more accurate than 538 in predicting the 2016 presidential election. Kelly's ahead by 7, so that's a good sign for him. And he's not really this race. We're gonna check out race ratings. Looking at race ratings, you see these ratings predictions. Most of these, they're all favoring the Democrats. This is a flip. In the most recent one of September 8th, likely Democratic. That says a lot about Martha McSally's chances here. She was rejected by voters in 2018. In 2018 she lost to Kirsten, so that's not a good sign for her at all. Same electorate from 2 years ago said no to her, and they're going to say no to her again. She may be the incumbent, but Mark Kelly's even more popular than Kirsten was in 2018. He's the husband of former Congresswoman Gabby Giffords, and it was a former astronaut. Fun fact about him, I've actually met his brother before. Very nice people. So, yeah. All right, now we're going to move on to the state of Colorado. And by the way, for those of you who are wondering about the polls, according to the more left-leaning of these sites, RCP, about Arizona, recent one has Kelly ahead by 10. So, this state is becoming more and more blue. RCP puts Kelly ahead comfortably, even if McSally does somehow overperform the polls, which, by the way, these same polls that are putting Kelly ahead had McSally ahead 2 years ago. So they're no way underestimating her, or they're not missing something, because she was head in the polling by 1 on election day, and she ended up losing by 2.5. So yeah. All right, in Colorado now, we're gonna look at the state of Colorado. If I can, top center race is Colorado. Come on, that doesn't want to show that's a top center race. That's a possible flip for the Democrats. Okay, I'm sorry. I didn't want to pull up the Colorado Democratic primary. I just wanted to Colorado. There we go, Colorado Senate. So, the most recent polls don't want to come up apparently, which is strange because this is a pretty interesting Senate race when you look at it. I mean, it's an easy flip for the Democrats, but looks like we're going to have to go to RCP. So the best of the best polls are putting Hickenlooper ahead by 10, pretty recently actually, sampling likely voters, putting Hickenlooper ahead by 10, 9, 9, 6, 11. So, yeah, 18. And then this poll was taken in 2019, a long time ago. It's kind of a weird poll. I don't know who Johnston is, but they're sampling him against Cory Gardner. They're putting Gardner ahead by 6. But, the best poll sampling registered voters, A- poll sampling registered voters, puts Hickenlooper ahead by 13. I mean, he's a popular former governor, so running against an unpopular GOP senator in a blue state. So, looking like Cory Gardner has a very low chance of winning re-election. I mean, according to the JHK forecast, whoops, I don't want to click on Senate. So we're going to go to Senate, JHK forecast. The Democrats actually had they had a huge, I don't know what it was, but I remember checking a few days ago, they were at 59 and they're at 64 now. So that is a huge, what a surge. Wow, I'm pretty shocked right now, but I'm not sure if it was a certain race, but something shifted towards the Democrats. So right now, Cory Gardner only has a 16% chance of winning re-election. He never was the favorite, but it is looking like Hickenlooper is going to end up winning by a good margin. So Minnesota, Michigan will also looking like they're going to be likely. I see a couple more right-wing forecasters saying that Michigan has a chance of going red, which it does. And I'm not going to count out John James. I mean, he made this a somewhat close race in 2018 against the popular incumbent Debbie Stabenow. He ended up losing, though, by basically 7 points, give or take. But the polling has been very bad for him. I mean, sure, he was behind in the polls, in 2017 when they were sampling early, and he was, but, that's just not something to take into account. But we're in September now. We're in the height of election season, and Peters is polling ahead of James by a decent amount, but the same as Stabenow was at this point in time. But the polls in RCP are better for the Democrats. I mean, Peters is ahead by 4, by 7, by 4, by 12, so RCP does a better job at weighting them. But because they take right-wing polls into sample more. And by the way, there is one poll, Trafalgar Group, that did put James ahead by 1. Remember, that is a right-wing internal poll that has been very wrong in the past. So there's been a lot of talk about that. I would not take it seriously until I am proven wrong about this, which I do not think I will be. Especially, if you want to see what the experts are saying about Michigan, Michigan, we're going to try to find Michigan. The polling there actually has been an indicator of the rating. Essentially, most forecasters are giving it a lean Democratic rating. RCP gives it as a toss-up. That's not a toss-up. And then Niskanen and DDHQ. And there's when Niskanen rates as likely Democrats. So the polling has been somewhat, somewhat flip-floppy, but this is not a good chance for if the GOP wants to hold on to the Senate, they need to focus on Montana, Iowa, and Maine and North Carolina. Those are the races they need to focus on. They need to stop wasting money in Arizona, Colorado, and Michigan. But yeah, Minnesota. I'm not going to talk about that as much as I talked about Michigan. I don't think there's any great polling on Minnesota. Jason Lewis is running there, but the recent polls have put Smith ahead on average by 9. So. Again, Amy Klobuchar, she won re-election by a big amount. So Minnesota is a blue state as of right now, and I don't expect it to flip. Now, I talked way too much about Michigan. We're going to fill out our likely Republican states, kind of go through these pretty quickly. Yes, that's a lot of likely states. Forgot New Hampshire for the Democrats. Just Shaheen is a popular senator, and she will hold on to her race. Looking like that, the polling has her ahead by comfortable margins, and she has not a very well-known challenger. So, Democrats are at 2 seats away from the majority, according to my projection, that Joe Biden will win the presidency. So they need 50 seats for a majority, assuming they win the presidency, 3 more for an outright majority, which would be 51. So Kansas, starting out with Kansas. Actually, I was going to start with Alaska, where RCB doesn't really like to talk about Alaska polls for some reason, but I'll have to go over to 538, where the most recent poll on Alaska was taken not too long ago, had it even, August 31st, end of August. So we're kind of seeing a wide range. Ignore these two polls. They're putting it as even Sullivan by 13 and Sullivan by 5. Now, Al Gross is a good candidate. He is doing a good job there. But he's running as a independent technically in a red state, but he's going to be associated with the Democrats. And Democrats have won here before, but Al Gross, I don't think he's going to be able to flip it. I mean, when you look at the polling and JHK forecast giving him like a very small chance of winning this race, only around 4%. So I don't think it's going to bode well for him. Now, Al Gross, I think he has the chance for a Democrat in Alaska, but this is not exactly this is not a pickup for the Democrats. Kansas, where there has been a good amount of polling. Now, if you're thinking, why is Kansas competitive? Well, the reason is because Barbara Bollier, who is the Democrat, who I had a hard time pronouncing her name. It's Bollier, by the way. She is running against Roger Marshall. Bollier was a former Republican in the Kansas State Senate. She flipped to the Democrats because she was pro-LGBTQ rights, and she was not a big fan of President Trump. So that's why she switched over the Democrat. She is, I believe, running as a conservative Democrat. So she'll 100% outperform Joe Biden in Kansas. But I don't think she'll be able to win. Now, if the Republicans are running someone like Chris Kobach, who lost the 2018 governor's race, I think the Democrats would be able to win this race. But Roger Marshall is just a regular Republican in Kansas who I don't think is that polarizing. So I don't think that he'll lose this race. I mean, yes, he did. He is short on money because he had to spend all of that defeating Chris Kobach in that contested primary. But Barbara Bollier, she has the money advantage for sure, and she has the hype advantage. But I mean, in Kansas, Democrats they haven't won a Senate race there since the 1930s, so not looking too good for them overall. So I want to say Barbara Bollier has a good chance at this. What she does for a Democrat, I mean, JHK forecast has it as a 13% chance of her winning, almost 12% actually. So, yeah, but, other than that, I don't think that she'll be able to win this race because it's Kansas. All right, and now we're going to move on to Texas, where I'm not going to talk about that for too long. The bottom line is John Cornyn, the Democrats, people are getting kind of hyped about Texas for the Democrats. I mean, Beto O'Rourke, he came so close to winning the Senate race there, right? He lost it only by a tilt margin. Well, he was running against Ted Cruz, first of all, who was very unpopular at the time. And he ran a good campaign, a very good campaign for a Democrat in Texas. MJ Hager, she is running a not a great campaign, to be honest. She had to win a contested primary against Royce West. So that's not great for her, but, she'll make it likely because this is Texas, and this is somewhat of a swing state. And then also, remember, John Cornyn isn't too popular, but I think he's more popular than Ted Cruz was. So that's my reasoning for Texas being likely Republican. Mississippi, Mike Espy, he's running there. He ran in 2018. He ended up losing by I don't know, it was in a special election. I don't know why to. Why does it not let me? Come on, it doesn't let me show the Mississippi special election. So. Yeah, alright, so Mississippi being likely, I just think it'll be like a 10, 11 point win for Cindy Hyde-Smith. She's running against Mike Espy. As I mentioned, Espy ran in 2018. He lost by, I think, 6 or 7 points, something like that. So I think he will do worse than he did in 2018, but I think it'll still be likely. Now, Alabama, this would usually be safe, solid red, but Doug Jones is the incumbent there. He's an incumbent Democrat. Remember, in 2017, he won a special election against Roy Moore, who was a child molester, but he still only won by 2 points. So, Alabama is going to swing back to the Republican candidate Tommy Tuberville, who is nowhere near as controversial as Roy Moore was. And the fact that Roy Moore, a child molester, came within 2 points of winning that Senate race says a lot about the electorate of Alabama. And I think they're very conservative, and Democrat Doug Jones winning there was absolutely huge for the Democrats. But I don't think he can win re-election. I mean, he's running in a solidly red state in a presidential election. He's done. In Georgia special, there's not a ton of polling there either, but basically the Democrats kind of choked away the seat. They could have run a good candidate, like Stacey Abrams maybe, but they didn't, and they ran two candidates. They're going to essentially split the vote and give it to Doug Collins. So that's a lost cause for Democrats. And in South Carolina, that's far from safe Republican. South Carolina, I understand there's a lot of hype around Jaime Harrison, the is going to show up as the top scenarios. South Carolina, Harrison versus Graham. The recent polls has its tie from Quinnipiac, which is a decent poll. But overall, this is a red state. There should be, I'm not sure that there will be voter suppression, but that's still not a good sign for the Democrats. If there is, which would obviously hurt them, but the best of the best polls are still putting Graham ahead by 17. Although, to be fair, that was in February, but other polls, a B plus rated poll is still pretty good. That's actually today. So even I don't think honestly, I understand the polls are telling me that it'll be a toss up, but Lindsey Graham is not going to lose. I'm sorry. And lastly, Kentucky, Mitch McConnell. People don't like him. People think he's corrupt, blah, blah, blah. But first of all, his opponent, Amy McGrath, had to deal with a contested primary against Charles Booker, so she had to spend more money than planned on that. And then second, people are going to say, I don't like Mitch McConnell, but I'm going to vote down ballot for him. So, yeah, they're going to vote down ballot for him just because they're going to vote for Trump. So McGrath is going to outperform Biden there, and she could make it close. I just don't think that she'll be able to win. All right, now we're going to go to our lean Democrat states. That's North Carolina, and that's Maine. So now they're at 50 seats. Congratulations, Democrats. Congratulations, Democrats. You have won the Senate majority according to UEP. And the state of North Carolina. We're going to look at the polling. There is a lot of polling on North Carolina. Like, people love to poll North Carolina, as they should, because this is a contested state. North Carolina, Tillis versus Cunningham. So RCP, Cunningham, at one point he had a 9-point lead. That was never gonna hold. When was it actually? That was in July, end of July. But he's back up to a good lead. Up by 3.3, up by 3.6. So he's had a solid lead for this whole time. Tillis overtook him in June for a little bit, but Kel Cunningham is the favorite to win this race for sure. I mean, even on Wikipedia, they're giving Cunningham the solid edge there. In North Carolina, we're going to look at the predictions. Likely Democratic. No, I'm not sure about likely Democrat, but the recent polling, it was neck and neck here. Now it's starting to go Cunningham leading there, but most people rate it as a toss up. But DDHQ, I agree with. I think it will be lean. I mean, look at the polling. It is certainly favoring Cunningham. He's running ahead of Joe Biden in the state, and Tom Tillis is unpopular, as we know. Cunningham is a strong, non-polarizing candidate that really I do not expect to lose this race. The best poll, simply registered voters, A+, Monmouth University, Cunningham by 1. Another good poll. Actually, this is even better because it's simply more registered voters, Cunningham by 9. So that is very, very interesting, and I do think that it could be tilt, but the Democrats definitely should be favored here. Cal Cunningham running a very good campaign. Again, as I mentioned, I do think he will win this race. And in Maine, Susan Collins is an unpopular incumbent. She cannot please anyone. I mean, her voting record has been really bad for. Democrats, all they have to do in a blue state like Maine is say, Susan Collins, she voted for Kavanaugh, she's a Republican. She's not bipartisan anymore. Vote for Sarah Gideon. And that's what they need to do. Kind of like the Republicans are literally running ads in Alabama saying Doug Jones is a Democrat. That's it. So, this should be an easier pickup for the Democrats than it is, because Collins is still going to get a lot of independent support, despite, Maine is somewhat of an independent state. So the Republicans in 2014, in 2014, the Republicans won the gubernatorial election there with Paul LePage. So I don't think that Collins is going to hold on. But remember, she's unpopular. I don't think she's going to hold on. But remember that she's still getting a good amount of support. And, I still think that she can win this race, so I wouldn't count her out yet. They're not going to give me the little graph. That kind of makes me sad. But on average, Gideon's ahead by 6.5, which would be a likely margin, but I'll keep it in the lean column as of right now. Now, the Republican lean seats, that is the one seat. That's the state of Georgia, where John Ossoff is trying to unseat David Perdue. Purdue's just a popular incumbent. He is not in danger at all. I understand the polling has been somewhat close between Ossoff and Perdue, but Purdue's ahead in an average by 4.3, so if they give me the pleasant little graph, I'd appreciate it. But RCP is going to be difficult today, so currently not. But yeah, so David Perdue is popular. He's not unpopular, so I don't think he's in danger, especially in a red state like Georgia, which is infamous for its voter suppression tactics, especially with their governor. So I don't think that bodes well for Ossoff. He could run a very strong campaign, and I still don't think he'd be favored to win. Now, the state of Montana, this is a more controversial call that I have, and even JHK forecasts. Me and my boy Jack Kirsten, we agree on a lot of stuff. He does not agree with me on this one. He gives the Democrats a 1 in 3 chance, which is still nothing to sneeze at. 1 in 3 chance at winning in Montana. So, for sure, the Democrats have a good chance here. And I'm going to explain why I think the Democrats are going to be able to win in Montana. At the Senate level, at least. Probably not the governor level, though. But, number one, they won the Senate race there in the same polarized environment with the same electorate by, 4 points? 3.5 points in 2018. With John Tester, who is popular but not as popular as the guy running, Steve Bullock. Number two, speaking of Steve Bullock, he won re-election as governor on the same ballot as Donald Trump did in 2016. So same ballot, presidential election year. Voters picked him, and he won by, I think, 4 or 5 points, which is a good amount for a Democrat in Montana. And number three is that this is no new thing. Democrats in Montana have had a long history of winning. In fact, they've held on to the governor's mansion since the 90s. They've always held the Senate seats there. In fact, in 2014, or up until 2014, they held all the Senate seats. The other Democrat other than John Tester was Max Baucus from Montana. He retired in that seat. The seat Max Baucus held went to Steve Daines. And Steve Daines is now being challenged by Bullock, the popular governor, for those of you who don't know. So Bullock, governors don't translate to victories in the Senate, but they do in Montana because, remember, this is not a down ballot state. And people are going to call me out for saying, and by the way, I'll be accountable. I did think the Democrats had a very good chance of winning in Tennessee, that Senate race there in 2018 because of Phil Bredesen. But Tennessee has voted Republican at every level since early 2000s. Montana is the complete opposite. In fact, the Democrats have won more Senate races and more governor's races than the Republicans have in the past 20 years here. So they like to vote in conservative, moderate Democrats along with Republicans there. So that's why I think Bullock's going to win. And lastly, in the state of Iowa, we are going to pull up. Iowa. Joni Ernst is ahead in some polls, but behind in others. So, whoops! You can see I totally did not prepare for that one. But she's ahead on average by 0.3 in the RCP average, but in 538, it's a bit better for her. The Risk Reason poll has her ahead by 5. However, other polls are putting her behind. In fact, these three in a row putting her behind. So, kind of streaky, I guess, where you have polls that are putting Greenfield ahead. Then you have a streak of polls putting Ernst ahead. Then Greenfield and Ernst. So, Ernst, I do believe, is the favorite to win re-election because this is a red state. And I understand the Democrats, they won the House, a popular vote there in 2018. And I understand that they're leading in the polls on average. But still, polls underestimate the Republican support in Iowa. And Joni Ernst is unpopular, but she's not too unpopular, so I do think she'll be able to hold on, narrowly beating out Teresa Greenfield. So guys, thanks for watching this video. Be sure to like and subscribe. This is one of my longer ones, but I like to talk about Senate elections a lot, so that's the Senate map, 51-49 for the Democratic Party. But guys, thank you so much for 1,000 subscribers. Check out my face reveal. It's coming out tomorrow, 4:30 p.m. Pacific, 7:30 p.m. Eastern, around that time, maybe a little later, but around that time. And if you haven't already, I'll put the link in the comments and description. Fill out the form, ask me a question for the Q&A, and I'll answer all of them. So guys, thanks for watching, and I'll see you all in the next video.